What if everything we thought we knew about the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been a lie? What if Tony Stark, the genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist who sacrificed himself to save the universe, was never meant to be the hero at all? What if Thanos, the mad titan, knew something deeper, something darker, something that connects Tony's destiny not with Iron Man, but with one of Marvel's most dangerous and legendary villains, Dr. Doom? Ask yourself, why was Thanos so fixated on Stark? Out of trillions of living beings across galaxies, why did he look into Tony's eyes on Titan and call him by name, almost as if he had known him his entire life? Was it fate? Was it prophecy? Or was it because Tony Stark's true path was never that of a savior, but of a conqueror who would rise from the ashes of his sacrifice? Reborn into the ironclad mask of doom? This is not just another fan theory. This is a story that bends time, destiny, and identity itself. A story where every action Tony ever took was guiding him, step by step, closer to the inevitable truth that Thanos himself recognized. The man who would become Dr. Doom was already walking among them. And if you think that sounds too far-fetched, stay with me. Because once we start connecting the dots, Tony's obsession with control, his fatal flaws, his brilliance, his arrogance, his final sacrifice, and Thanos' cryptic recognition of him, you'll realize this story was hiding in plain sight all along. So let's begin where all stories of destiny begin. Not at the end, not at the middle, but at the moment when paths cross, and a villain sees something in a hero that no one else can. When Thanos arrived on Titan, the battle was more than a clash of fists, magic, and strategy. It was a meeting of minds. Every hero that stood in his way had their reasons for fighting. Strange was defending the Time Stone. Peter was protecting his mentor. Drax wanted vengeance. But Tony Stark? He fought not just because he had to, but because he believed he was the one who had to stand against destiny itself. He believed he could outthink inevitability, and that is exactly the kind of hubris that defines Dr. Doom. Thanos calls him Stark like they're old rivals, almost like Reed Richards and Doom locked in eternal conflict. But here's the strange part. Tony Stark had never met Thanos before that moment. Thanos shouldn't have known him at all. And yet, there was something in Thanos' words, something in the way he acknowledged him, not like a stranger, but like someone he already understood, someone written into the cosmic fabric of fate itself. Think about this carefully. When Strange looks into 14 million possible futures, he sees only one where they win. But why did he never reveal what he truly saw? Could it be because the one future was never about Tony Stark's death, but about Tony Stark's transformation? Because the truth was too terrifying for the others to understand. That their friend and ally wasn't just a martyr. He was the seed of something greater, something more dangerous than Thanos himself. It begins with Tony's obsession. From the very start of the MCU, Tony has been haunted by visions of catastrophe. After New York, he couldn't sleep. He built suit after suit, drones, AIs, entire armies of technology, not to protect humanity, but to control it. Remember Ultron? That wasn't a fluke. That was Tony Stark's true nature slipping through. His willingness to play God, to decide the fate of others, to believe his brilliance gave him the right to rule. That right there is Victor Von Doom's philosophy. Doom believes only he has the intellect and will to save the world, and therefore the right to control it. Sound familiar? When Wanda forced Tony to see his fear, his friends dead, the world shattered, and him powerless, that moment became his driving force. But here's the chilling truth. Fear doesn't just motivate heroes. It shapes villains. And Tony Stark's fear was not about protecting the world. It was about controlling it so he could never feel powerless again. That is the same obsession that drives Doom to his darkest choices. So why did Thanos single him out? Because Thanos, who saw himself as inevitable, recognized the same inevitability in Tony. The inevitability of intellect too great to remain a servant to others. The inevitability of a man who would eventually rise above morality and step into destiny. Not as Iron Man, but as Doom. Look closely at Endgame. Tony's arc doesn't end with peace, it ends with fire. His sacrifice is framed as noble. But what if it wasn't an ending at all? What if it was the beginning of the multiversal fracture that Strange feared? In a world of branching timelines, a Tony Stark who survived, scarred, broken, furious at being abandoned, would have no reason to remain the man he once was. Imagine him waking up in another timeline, his body mangled by infinity energy, his face scarred beyond recognition. What mask would such a man wear to hide his shame and reveal his wrath? A mask of iron, a mask of doom. Here is where the story twists into prophecy. In the comics, Doom's origin is tied to tragedy, brilliance, and an unshakable belief in destiny. In the MCU, Tony already embodies all of those traits. Doom was always meant to be a man who suffered, who was scarred, who lost everything, and in that loss found not humility, but power. And who does that sound like more than Tony Stark? But let's go back to Titan for a moment. When Thanos says to Tony, "You're not the only one," cursed with knowledge, he isn't talking about technology. He isn't talking about being smart. He's talking about foresight. Doom's curse has always been his ability to see the bigger picture, to understand the stakes, to play 10 moves ahead of everyone else. Thanos saw that same curse in Tony. That's why he respected him. That's why he knew him. Because in another reality, in another time, maybe Tony Stark was the only man who could rival Thanos, not as a hero, but as Doom. And let's not forget, Doctor, Doom's most famous storylines always tie to the multiverse, to power beyond comprehension, to standing at the center of cosmic wars. What is the MCU building toward? Secret Wars. Who is the most important figure in Secret Wars? Not Kang, not Strange, not the Avengers. Doom, the God Emperor of Battleworld, the man who reshapes reality with his own will. So here's the question. What if Tony Stark was never truly gone? What if his essence, his consciousness, or his very soul was carried across time by the Infinity Stones themselves? What if his sacrifice was the catalyst not for his end, but for his ascension? The death of Iron Man, the rise of Doom. Now imagine the ultimate twist. When the multiverse begins to collapse, when incursions threaten to end everything, the heroes search desperately for someone with the intellect to stop it. They need Reed Richards, they need Strange, they need every genius alive. But standing in the shadows, a man returns, not as their friend, not as their savior, but as their doom. And Thanos' words echo across the cosmos, revealing what he knew all along. Tony Stark was always destined to become Dr. Doom. Act 1 ends here not with certainty, but with dread. Because if this theory is true, then the MCU hasn't just been telling the story of Iron Man, it's been telling the origin story of its greatest villain, hiding in plain sight from the very beginning. When Tony Stark snapped his fingers in Endgame, the audience believed it was the ultimate sacrifice, the closure of his arc, the final proof that the once selfish man had become the savior of all. But what if that moment was never about salvation at all? What if his death was only the illusion of an ending, while in truth it was the beginning of something far darker, something that even Strange dared not put into words? Let's think about this carefully. The Infinity Stones are not just weapons. They are primal forces of existence, time, space, soul, reality, power, and mind. Each one carries not only energy but consciousness. We've seen how the Soul Stone demands sacrifice, how the Time Stone whispers futures, how the Reality Stone bends perception. When Tony wielded all 6 at once, he didn't simply burn his body, he intertwined his essence with the very code of the universe. That means Tony's soul was scattered across existence itself. Death was never final. Death was only transformation. And here lies the secret Thanos knew. Because Thanos himself had touched this power, felt the curse of knowledge, and glimpsed the echoes of possible futures. When he looked at Tony on Titan and called him by name, he wasn't just acknowledging a clever opponent. He was acknowledging destiny. He saw the man who, in another timeline, in another cycle of infinity, would emerge not as Iron Man, but as something much more terrifying, Dr. Doom. Now let's step back. Doom's story in the comics has always been tied to scars, both physical and emotional. Victor Von Doom loses everything, makes a catastrophic mistake, and is left deformed, his once proud face destroyed, his soul hardened into iron. Now think of Tony. His final act of snapping the stones left his body burnt, his form almost unrecognizable. But in the multiverse, what if there was a branch, a single divergence where Tony didn't die, What if instead, he lived broken, scarred, furious at the others for letting him sacrifice himself alone? Imagine this Tony waking up, his right arm charred beyond use, his face half melted by cosmic energy, his mind filled not with peace, but with the whispers of the stones echoing inside him. He survives, but survival costs him everything: his humanity, his identity, his hope. He cannot be Iron Man anymore. He cannot go back. So he becomes something else. He becomes Doom. But how? How does the man who once stood beside Earth's mightiest heroes take the mask of its greatest villain? The answer is simple: necessity and inevitability. In the absence of Tony Stark, the Avengers crumble. The world loses its protector, but the Tony who survives in the shadows watches, and he remembers the truth, that heroes fail, that people disappoint, and that only his brilliance can hold the universe together. And so, like Victor Von Doom of the comics, he does not become evil out of pettiness, but out of conviction. He convinces himself that only he can save existence, even if it means ruling it with an iron fist. Now consider Strange's silence. He saw 14 million futures. He saw one path to victory. And yet when Tony asked if this was the one, Strange refused to answer until the very last second. Why? Because he knew the real answer was too horrifying to speak. The one path wasn't just about beating Thanos. It was about setting the stage for what came next. Strange saw the emergence of Doom. He saw Tony's transformation. He saw the new threat that made Thanos look like nothing more than a stepping stone toward the real inevitability. And here's where the pieces click into place. In the comics, Doom becomes God Emperor. Doom during the events of Secret Wars. He takes the power of the Beyonders, reshapes the multiverse, and rules over Battleworld as the absolute authority of reality. Now the MCU is building toward its own secret wars. And ask yourself this: who better to embody Doom than the man who already has the intellect, the ego, the scars, the tragedy, and the destiny of Tony Stark? Who better to shock audiences, to shake the very foundation of Marvel storytelling, than revealing that the man we mourned as a hero has returned as the ultimate villain? But the most chilling part is this: Thanos already knew. Think back to his words on Titan. "You're not the only one cursed with knowledge." That wasn't casual banter. It was recognition. It was prophecy. Thanos saw himself as inevitable. But in Stark, he saw inevitability reborn. He knew that Tony was not destined to stay a hero. He knew that Tony's curse, the curse of intellect and foresight, would one day push him down the path of doom, and maybe, just maybe, that's why Thanos respected him. That's why he spared him on Titan. Because why kill your successor when destiny itself will shape him into the one who follows in your footsteps? Now picture the multiverse shattering, Kang variants fighting across time, incursions threatening entire universes, the heroes scrambling for solutions, Reed Richards appearing, Strange warning of the collapse. And then out of the shadows a figure emerges, a figure clad in armor not sleek and modern like Iron Man, but ancient, regal, terrifying, a mask forged not for style but for necessity, his face hidden, his scars eternal, his voice no longer the quippy charm of Tony Stark, but the cold decree of doom. And when the heroes demand his name, he does not say Stark. He does not say Iron Man. He says only one word: Doom. The shock would ripple through the multiverse. The betrayal would be unbearable. To see the man who once saved them now stand as their conqueror would not just break their hearts, it would shatter their faith. And yet, in his mind, Tony would not see himself as the villain. He would see himself as the only one capable of protecting reality from itself, just as Doom has always believed. But here's the ultimate twist. What if Thanos' entire plan, his pursuit of balance, his obsession with wiping out half of life, what if it wasn't about victory at all? What if Thanos' true role in the story was to forge the path for Doom, to bring Tony to the breaking point, to push him to sacrifice, to bind him to the stones, and to awaken the darker destiny that was always waiting inside him? What if Thanos wasn't the final boss, but the prologue? The real story, then, is not the Infinity Saga at all. It is the Doom Saga. The rise of Tony Stark as Dr. Doom, the god who reshapes reality, the conqueror who even Thanos acknowledged, the inevitability Strange refused to reveal, and the final test of the multiverse itself. And here's the most terrifying thought of all. When Tony said, "I am Iron Man," it wasn't just a declaration of identity. It was prophecy. Iron Man was only the beginning. Iron was always his destiny. But Doom was always his end.